wanted to talk to you guys some more today about childhood emotional neglect. Um, Excuse my mess. Still drinking my coffee and all. And didn't feel like putting on makeup. Okay. So I have a lot of other things I need to get done. So this is a mutual video. But I wanted to kind of like read to you guys some of the things that we don't typically think are emotional neglect, but they actually are. Because when I started learning more about childhood emotional neglect, I realized that there are a lot of things that I normalized that were not normal and were not okay. And I think a lot of us normalize things that we shouldn't because we're children. We don't understand how that's going to impact us as an adult. And then we become an adult and we're like, well, wait a second, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel like I have virtually no self-esteem and I'm always criticizing myself? Because that was me. Like last a year and a half ago, I was sitting, upstairs writing a song about how I had no self-esteem from the start because nobody gave me that first support. Well, my grandmother did. Um, when I was in kindergarten and I started writing, but it kind of fizzled away. It fizzled away when, and I'll get into this in a minute, but it fizzled away when I started having issues finishing projects, like things that I wanted to do, art projects, and then it became a pattern of being very critical of myself and that rejection sensitive dysphoria that we love with trauma, with autism, with ADHD, like that together combined creates a person like myself who will make tons of cool things, and some of them will see the light of day, some of them won't. And it's, you know, it's tragic because it's like there's so much art and things I've created that nobody's ever seen because I've been too scared to share it or too nervous about what people would think about it and the criticism, because that's kind of how I was taught to feel about myself, if that makes sense. So let me go through this list and then I will go back to that point briefly because I think that's a good point to bring up. So here's some of the different things that childhood emotional neglect could be, even if it's not something super obvious that you might have been thinking. Um, Being called too sensitive or told to toughen up when you express your emotions. And this especially is also a generational thing. You know, and discipline, like I was spanked as a child, and then when I got to a certain age, it was timeout, and I was isolated in timeout. I had to be completely by myself, facing a wall with a chair, okay, in my room, and not allowed to play with my toys. So there are certain things that, like, generationally, they're baby boomers, and before that, those type of parents are going to be, yeah, suck it up. You got to suck it up. You got to get through this. But my parents weren't, you got to suck it up. You got to get through this. Come on, let's go. Let's do it. As in, like, motivating. They were, suck it up. I'm not doing this again with you. Suck it up. It was such a different kind of tone. And, I was the youngest, third child. I know that they were tired. I mean, number three, like, you're kind of like, okay, all right, we've done this twice, like, okay. But, you also can't sit there and justify things that really hurt you and say, okay, well, it wasn't that bad. So remember that there's sort of a line with that, and you have to really think about it yourself and think about how it's impacted you. If that toughen up attitude really did impact you as a child that badly, that you're having trouble functioning now, then that's definitely a big piece of your emotional neglect that you should think about and and try to kind of figure out why of why it really hurt you. Once you figure out that why, you can figure out what you need to give yourself that your parents could not give you. And that's bringing you one step closer to loving yourself and not hating yourself. So, okay, sorry, I went off on a tangent, but let me just read off the rest of the list, and then I might make multiple videos about this because now I feel like I can go on a whole thing about this. But some other ones: being ignored, dismissed, or left alone when you're experiencing very strong emotions. Caregivers not showing affection and or being emotionally distant. And emotional distance is, I like to look at that as kind of like, I felt like my parents didn't make an extra effort to get to know me. You know, after a certain age, it was like, okay, well, she's doing her thing. There wasn't an extra effort to really get to know me as a person and respect me and value me as a person. I was the child, they were the adults. It was, I do what I say. It wasn't, you know, bring your own uniqueness to the family. And I always watched sitcoms growing up, and I'd see like Malcolm in the Middle, for instance. I loved Malcolm in the Middle. How many people loved Malcolm in the Middle? Okay, we're definitely not getting through this whole list today, but whatever. ADHD and autism, I tell you. That's me. And trauma. Okay, come. So Malcolm in the Middle is a great example because in that family, there's three boys. And so I kind of related to the show because I had my brother, my sister, and me. And I was the youngest, like Dewey. And Dewey always kind of gets neglected by the parents. And they don't mean to a lot of times, they just end up doing it. And you see how over time, poor little Dewey, who is this like savant, by the way, because there's one episode where he like teaches himself piano and then gets this grand piano put in his room for a few days or something. And he's like written this masterpiece. But his parents are too busy with the other two kids and chaos going on to notice. And I think that's really at the core of it. But you'll also notice in that show and a lot of sitcoms, parents treat their children in some of these shows like they're equals, like their opinions matter, their opinions are valuable. Whereas in my family, it was all the parents are right. It's what they believe, it's what they say. And there wasn't room for me to grow personally and kind of like ask questions and things. It was more like, I'm right, you're wrong. You do what I say because I said so. I don't have to tell you why because I'm the parent. And so when that's the continual message over time, it really does. It impacts you. So there are some other ones. One of the other big ones that really has impacted me is the one that says caregiver not being interested in your life or experiences. So going back to that example from Malcolm in the Middle and how Dewey felt like, you know, he created something so cool and he wanted to, show them. And then at the end of the episode, he does this weird like thing with the garage and makes like a whole song out of things. He does something amazing. And his parents just kind of go, okay. And that's kind of how I felt like in a lot of ways. I took guitar lessons that my parents paid for, and they weren't very motivating and continually supportive. They were just kind of like, how's it going? Okay, yeah, we'll see if, you know, they didn't have that belief in me that I needed from them. So anyway, those are some examples of different types of emotional neglect in childhood. If you've experienced any of those things, you are not alone, and I'm here to help you kind of think about your experience, and hopefully by me talking about mine, it will help you to understand or begin to try and understand your trauma and how it's impacted you. So I'm going to go now, guys. Bye.